Hola, soy Berenice Hernán. Esto es Península 360. Esta es una serie de entrevistas a los candidatos y las candidatas al Consejo de la ciudad de Redwood City. Las entrevistas constan de 9 preguntas, las mismas para todos los aspirantes, los cuales tendrán 1 minuto para contestar. Hoy hablaremos con Lissette Espinoza-Garnica, quien es candidata para el Distrito número 3. Hello, Lissette. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us. My first question for you is, why do you want to be on the City Council? ¿Por qué quieres ser concejal?
I'm running for city council because I realize that our city council doesn't really represent us, especially us as a District 3 that's minority majority. It's for too long represented realtors, apartment associations, and high earning residents versus trying to preserve the low income communities of color. And I'm really trying to remedy all of those effects that are systemic, but also city council plays a part in. So I really want to work to bring justice to the working class people and renters and protections for them, and especially during COVID, so we have security for everyone.
Esta es la primera vez que vamos a tener una elección distrital. ¿Nos puedes decir cuál es la diferencia?
It's been a benefit to me in ways that it's smaller, so it's not as much work having to volunteer and do such thing as as much work trying to drop literature and reach as many people. I think it benefits us that way. And it's trying to diversify the amount of speakers in city council, which I'm in favor of, because like I said, city council has a long preference for those with higher incomes and developers like that. So I think having more minority majority based districts is beneficial for us overall, for new coming elections and budgets for the city and such.
¿Cuáles crees que son los principales problemas que enfrenta la comunidad latina en tu distrito?
I think right now it's housing and gentrification. It's the lack of workers and renters protections, and also the lack of COVID relief and funding for that, because the Latinx community are disproportionately affected by COVID, by gentrification, displacement, and are the highest demographic representing poverty in Redwood City, even though they're only 38% of the population. So I think we have a very deep-seated issue within our governing, and we need to really address such as these things through public housing, guaranteeing housing for all, and providing more resources to the community, like youth programs, community-based trauma centers, or neighborhood-based centers, and more funding for public transportation to be free Wi-Fi, especially during the pandemic. This would be ideal for students to learn remotely and have access to stable Wi-Fi rather than relying on the limited quantity of hotspots, for example. So everything to ease the workers' lives and improve the quality of their lives and be pro-union. And I think those are essential for the longevity of the Latinx community.
¿Cómo te le vas a acercar a la comunidad latina?
Yeah, I'm a Chicanx person, and so I grew up in these communities myself, and I grew up in these public schools. I attended the Fair Oaks Elementary School that's now closed, Kennedy Middle School, and then the Atherton and all that stuff. So I grew up in the community, so I know a lot, or I know a few people in the community now who are facing the same issues. Like I'm facing these issues right now as someone who can't afford rent even. I've been a caregiver, and that's so many low-income people of color, especially women and femmes who are domestic workers like myself. So these issues, I try to really have an intersection of class with race and gender embedded in my analysis and perspective to really reach other people and organize better, because all of this is tied together. Like, we are people of color, and systemically we are disproportionately paid less because our labor and time is seen as less than. So I'm really trying to build an intersectional labor class consciousness. I've been working with DSA to organize rallies, like we've seen the police abolition rallies, and also I regularly host, or I regularly lead a defund the police call with the Silicon Valley DSA. So I try to work with the community as much as possible and aligned with other communities. Like, it's inter-organization type of collaborative work we do in our actions.
¿Qué has hecho antes con la comunidad latina y otras comunidades de color?
I would say previously, almost right after I graduated from high school, I organized an effort to implement ethnic studies at my former high school, Menlo Atherton, because they had a really racist event go on that I caught word of, where it was called Ghetto Night, and a lot of the students, mainly white, but also mainly non-Black, and I think there's probably Latinx people that are complicit in that. So, not to wash over that. We got to talk about that. But that's why I started pushing for it, because I also knew that the reason students that were Latinx and Black that were being suspended at high rates, expelled at high rates, and not attending class at high rates, not because we don't have an interest in education, but because they lacked culturally relevant education. They don't have enough teachers that look like us, that come from our backgrounds. And one of the issues with that is the reason we have that is because how unaffordable it is to live here. So we need to really, develop affordable housing and guaranteed housing for essential workers like teachers and such, for that reason, so we can have high quality education for our students that is culturally relevant and with insight, with actual background history and class struggle and racial struggles and stuff like that. So, and that's currently a thing, and hopefully it's gonna be passed that they make it a requirement instead of gov class. The last time I spoke with Alan Weiner, and not Alan Weiner, I don't think it was, I spoke with someone and they said that they were trying to implement ethnic studies as a requirement for graduating the high school instead of government with everything. And I think it's great. And so I think everything from there has been building up on that. That's why I've been so involved in defunding the police, because Latinx people of color in general, are disproportionately harmed by police brutality and, suffer from poverty and discrimination and homelessness, which is criminalized by police activity. So in order to have a healthy community, we need to defund the police and invest in resources that actually suit us, that prevent crimes, because poverty creates crime, not guaranteeing housing creates crime. So rather than criminalizing people for substance abuse, for example, we have centers for rehabilitation for those. So yeah, I hope that answered that.
¿Qué opinas de la justicia social en Redwood City?
So when there was about 3,000 people showing up for the Movement for Black Lives, and with all these calls for police, I've been hearing a lot from city council and predominantly white residents of Redwood City, that we don't need to defund the police, that these national calls shouldn't hit Redwood City because our police are different. But I think it's about time that citizens are much more engaged and analytical about what Redwood City does, because it's changed drastically in the last 10 years, and it's not all that they say that it is. Even if there is well-intentioned efforts, there's not enough being done to center the needs of low-income people of color and workers' rights and renters. And so I think Redwood City is trying to, a lot of people don't understand that these calls for defunding or these more progressive things are needed in our city, because I think we're very isolated and it's been very quiet. But there's a lot of smart people, a lot of progressive people still in Redwood City that I've been in contact with. And so I think it's really exciting, the amount of engagement I've seen so far develop over this period of time. So I think there's a lot to look forward to in terms of more progressive candidates and that type of civic engagement, especially with district elections like this. More diverse people can run. So yeah, I think a lot is going to change really fast, and a lot of people won't know what's going to hit them, essentially.
¿Cuáles son los obstáculos del compromiso social en Redwood City y cuáles son tus estrategias para afrontarlos?
My goodness. Okay, so the only reason I have time to run is because I was laid off because of COVID. I was a pre-K assistant, teacher's assistant, and then because of COVID, they had to lay me off. And I live with my folks. Okay, so I ain't gotta worry about like the same renters issues as everyone else. I still can't afford to rent, which is an issue, but I'm stable where I am, and I have this time while I'm part-time taking care as a caregiver to run a campaign. And having access to time is a big reason a lot of people aren't civically engaged. A lot of people are conscious. A lot of the Latinx people are conscious. They're not like, oh, I don't care about education. That's why there's all these expulsion rates. It's more like they don't have the time to take off. So I would really try to champion, again, things like universal childcare, a living wage, in order for people to be able to get more involved in their communities. I think I needed a lot of help. And so if I could also help with running or help develop programs that would educate regular folks on the process of what you need, because a lot of people told me what I needed and what I actually needed versus that was very different. So yeah, I think we need to teach folks more about grassroots organizing, because I'm specifically not organizing with private interest developers or police unions and such like that. So I think we need to implement education and civic engagement that's grassroots oriented and isn't about taking money from real estate, from realtors and stuff like that,
¿Cómo harás para que las políticas en Redwood City sean más abiertas a la inclusión y la diversidad?
Yeah, so I think to make it inclusive and more diverse, there's the guarantee to housing. There's the guarantee that you won't be addressed with a public health issue like substance abuse or anything like, homelessness with the police or anything like that. I think we need to develop a community that's more about mutual trust and mutual aid among us, so that we're much more organized and able to assess the community's needs, taking in mind people's racial, ethnic, gender background and their ability. I think all of this is about centering those who've been marginalized for centuries to make sure that they are given priority before office developments, before high-earning, ununionized tech earners or tech workers. I think that's the strategy we need to make sure that we give priority to the most vulnerable right now, and guaranteed housing and guaranteed livable wages so people can live in Redwood City if they work in Redwood City. A lot of people that are considered essential, like firefighters and teachers, cannot afford to live in Redwood City while they work here. So I think that's another thing about viability and keeping up the diversity. It's like we keep measures that are affirmative, like affirmative actions plans, and priority to local residents for jobs. We want to at least hire I want companies to hire mainly residents, local residents. East Palo Alto has a quota, like first source quota for how many people are hired locally. So I think we need to implement that, at least 50%, where most the locals are hired and not just people who live outside.
De ser elegida, ¿qué harás para la comunidad latina en los próximos 4 años?
Goodness, I hope to make myself available as much as possible. I am, to regular grievances or concerns or thoughts of the community and the Latinx community. I think there ought to be more opportunities to listen into the Latinx community and have more time to hear from the community themselves. I'm bilingual, so I hope I can speak to more people that way as well. Yeah, I think there's a lot that goes on, like city council wise, and it's been very shielded from the community and it's not made very transparent and accessible. So I really want to commit to making government as transparent as possible, so it's as easy and intuitive to manage as possible. So Latinx people are still involved. They get to hear what's happening and what's affecting them, hearing about tenants associations, worker unions, like I want to help build that union with the Latinx community so they have access to unions and people that are, organizing to protect renters and workers and such like that. So they're much more involved and much more engaged in what's going on in the city and local elections, for sure.
Thank you, Lissette.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
No se vayan a perder la próxima entrevista con otro candidato para el Consejo de la ciudad de Redwood City. Yo soy Berenice Hernán para Península 360 Press.